Perfect. So, everybody, today is a very special day, a very important one. It is your best friend's 62nd birthday. And so this morning, you got to the office extra early, beautiful bouquet of flowers, balloons, her favorite breakfast ready to go. You see her come up the elevator, walk into the hallway, walk into the office. Everybody shouts surprise, and she beelines right past all of you, right into the boss's office. She sits there, and what do you think she tells her boss? I'm done. Today's my last day. I'm retiring, and I want to start my pension right now. He's a little shocked, and he's like, really? Today? Are you sure? Yep, I'm sure. Well, by doing this today, you're going to be locking in a 30% reduction on your pension for the rest of your life. Did you know that? And she leans back and she says, yep, I know. Well, did you know that by claiming early, you're also impacting what your spouse's option for the rest of their life, too? She's nodding her head. She says, yes, I know. Well, did you know by also getting a smaller amount, the cost of living adjustments that you would be getting are also going to be reduced? You're not going to be getting as much. What do you think she says? I know. Well, okay, maybe you don't know this, that your pension has some tax efficiencies to it. And by getting a smaller amount, you're limiting some of your tax savings because where you live and plan on retiring, Social Security is exempt on the state level. So you don't have to pay state income tax and you're going to do that in a smaller amount. And what does she say? I know. Boss shakes his head, pulls out the last bit of hair he has, pulls out the paperwork, signs it, hands it to her, says, okay, well, congratulations. As she walks into her beautiful birthday party that you planned, she's smiling ear to ear. Now, the thing is, folks, everything that boss said is 100% correct. And if you didn't guess, that pension was Social Security. By locking in a lower age impacts not just you and your spouse. By locking it in earlier could reduce tax savings. It does also reduce the ultimate dollar amount you're going to get due to the cost of living adjustments of your lifetime. All those things are true. But the thing is that she knew. She had a plan. She had a team that was able to counterbalance that. Maybe she had income coming from sources greater than Social Security. She had a bigger tax advantage pot than what Social Security was going to provide. She had us. Now, I'm Kenneth Hamilton. I'm one of the managing members of Mission Financial Planners and a co-host of tonight's workshop. Of course, I'm joined with Matt Donaghue, our keynote speaker. The person you can't see is our other managing member and one of our rock stars, Mr. Jason Defoe. We work as an ensemble, and each one of us bring in different expertise in areas as subject matter experts. But when you're working with us, you're working with all of us as we build out a plan. Matt took care of some of the housekeeping items, but I'll remind you, the cameras are off. If you need anything, I'll be observing the chat the whole night. So don't hesitate to throw any questions in there. But also, if we don't get to it, or if you want to save it for your one-on-one, that's the perfect time to also ask those questions. But before I hand it over to Matt, really, I want to cover three items. Introducing you more intimately to Mission Financial Planners, walking you through some of the tax efficiencies around Social Security, and then truly understanding what all a financial plan entails. So if all that's okay, I'll go ahead and dive right in. So who is Mission Financial Planners? Well, we are a team of certified financial planners and fiduciaries. As I mentioned, each one of us are cross-trained into different specialties. Mine tends to lean a little bit more in towards the income investment strategy. Matt has amazing expertise around insurance and estate planning. Jason, tax, as well as working with business owners. And each one of us are competent in each of those areas, but all bring different perspectives when working together with our households. So why are we here tonight? I'll start with my line. As you get to know us, you'll learn a little bit more of everybody else's. I was raised by a single mother with two older sisters, an abundance of love and not much else. So very humble beginnings. And right around 12, 13 years old, my mother, one would say crazy, started her own business. And when you have a mortgage, a car payment, and three teenagers in the house, going from a steady wage to effectively zero was pretty scary, pretty crazy. But she did it. And seeing those first 3 to 5 years of that struggle and heartache and no income at times eventually turn into a well-oiled machine that, good news flashing ahead, she sold her business before 460 years old, is fully retired, living her best life. But reflecting back to those first 5, 10 years is that it didn't need to be that hard. It could have been better, it could have been easier. There could have been advice that she could have received to smooth out some of those bumps. And so working directly with women, for women, and for households that frankly love women, this is one of the reasons why we're doing this workshop tonight. And that's a little bit of my why. So let's talk a little bit about Social Security. Social Security is underrated by far. 9 out of 10 news articles just boo-hoo it about what it's not doing. But the reality is if you analyze the dollars you put into it and the dollars you get out of it, and then you Californians, the fact that it is state exempt in regards to your income can be a pretty nice part of reducing your taxes in retirement. On the federal level, there are 3 different scenarios. Best case scenario, if you're able to do some tax planning and it takes a few years to do so, you could get your tax bracket down to 0 and 100% of your Social Security's income tax-free. I know I can't see you, but go ahead and give yourself a thumbs up if that's something you would like. Now, second scenario, maybe you can't get your income all the way down to 0 because maybe you have some real estate income coming in or a small pension. Well, you can get 50% of your Social Security income tax-free on the federal level. Worst case scenario, 15% of your Social Security is tax-free, 1-5. Now, if 15% is tax-free, and that's the best that you can do, and sometimes that's the best some households can do, would you want that 15% to be smaller or larger? All things equal, if that's the only thing that was difference, I think most people would want that to be larger. So understanding that and what all those implications are and how to get there, that's why we're here tonight. So again, if you had a choice, would you want to be informed to know what you're walking away from, just like your friend who's retiring, or also what you're saying yes to for all those reasons? Last thing I'm going to talk about is what is a full financial plan. So I think all of y'all did receive this packet. If for whatever reason you did not, let us know in the chat and we can make sure and email you a copy. But this is our list of services at Mission Financial Planners. And when it comes to a financial plan, it covers 5 key areas for every single household. It starts with income, because retirement is a very expensive word for unemployment. Where is that next check going to come from? Is it from real estate, mineral rights, royalties? What do we have in place? That's one of the scariest things about finally putting in your papers is where's that first check coming from? And so that's step 1. Once we know where that is. Step 2 is, okay, of all that income that is now coming in that we plan for, how much of that is going to be supplemented from our investment pool, like your 401ks, IRAs, or brokerage accounts? And what does that portfolio look like? If a portfolio is designed for income, it should be designed for income. Some of your dollars should be designed for growth, and some of your dollars should be designed for the next generation or vacation or for charity or church. But each one of those purposes should have a different look. Next, if we do those 2 things right, that's our offensive strategy. What's our defensive strategy? And that's insurance planning. It's all the risks, the things that might be coming on, because that's what insurance is. It's offloading risk off of your plate and putting it on somebody else's. It's a transference of risk. And so this is everything from understanding Medicare, understanding long-term care, and all the different ways that you can plan for it. It is making sure that you have proper coverage on your homestead. With all the great appreciation we've seen on our homes over the last decade, more and more frequently we're finding people underinsured on their properties or their rentals. Now, if we do those three things right, income, investments, insurance, well, it means we're also going to be leaving some dollars behind when it comes to our estate plan. And what are our wants and wishes, and how do we protect our loved ones from commingling our assets? Because again, California is a community property state. So if your kiddos inherit some dollars, some people are concerned with them, some people aren't. But how do we make sure that those dollars do not become a marital asset? That's just one instance, part of an estate plan. The other one is just making sure that you get the quality of care that you deserve, that you've worked hard to maintain. And then finally is tax planning. And tax planning is what, in my opinion, what separates an okay plan versus an amazing one. Because it's not about how much income you can create or how big your investments grow. It's about how much of it you get to keep. And understanding taxes today, tomorrow, and beyond. And yes, they change, but having a plan that pivots to it is critical overall. So if you had a choice, would you want to work with somebody that believes what you believe, that understands taxes, understands how everything fits together, and then has a network of individuals that are there to help? Well, you already took one of the first big steps by being here tonight. I very much look forward to our follow-up meetings coming up in the next few weeks. Be on the lookout for future workshops and webinars that we're hosting. We hosted one earlier today on home equity loans and reverse mortgages, a taboo subject, but we had a subject matter expert on there talking about it with us to demystify some of those aspects. But with that, Matt, we promised everybody we're going to talk about Social Security. Anything you'd like to add before you dive in?
No, the biggest thing is, first of all, Ken, thanks for the great introduction, and thanks for introducing the team and what we do. The one thing I'd say about this list of services you can see here is we believe strongly enough in this that we actually, believe it or not, wrote a book about this. And this book is available for you to purchase on Amazon. It is called The 5 Pillars of Financial Freedom. And the key really is those 5 critical areas that Ken talked about, those 5 pillars. How does your income plan, of which Social Security is just a part, how does your income plan affect your investment plan? How is your insurance plan set up to protect your lifestyle, your dignity, and your family as you go through retirement? Does the tax plan reflect everything that you're dealing with? In other words, are we getting the most tax efficiencies possible? And then finally, what's the estate plan? One of the wildest things I hear about estate planning is, oh, well, I don't really need an estate plan. Everybody needs an estate plan. What it is, what's in it is going to be different from person to person, from family to family, but it is there. Now, this book is available tomorrow on Kindle for 99 cents. So if you want to get a copy and you're an e-reader, right, get it on Kindle, 99 cents tomorrow. That's going to be the best dollar you've ever spent. Go through it and you'll see a lot of detail breaking down some of the things that Ken was talking about. Okay, let's jump into Social Security planning, and let me just update my video a little bit here. Whoops. Okay. There we go. Okay. All right. So back in a little. There we go. All right. So I get a lot of questions about why do we reach out to women? Why is it savvy Social Security planning for women? Well, there's a kind of a truth to this that I think you'll appreciate. Most of us on the call are old enough to remember that kind of mystical time before cell phones. And, it might have been the early 90s. You're going somewhere, you know, maybe you're not entirely sure how to get there because, of course, there was no GPS back in those days. And you're a little turned around, you're a little lost, you're running late, you got to pee, right? I mean, all this stuff is kind of coming together. And who's the person who says, hey, let's ask for directions? It's never the guy, right? It is never the guy. And that's part of why we reach out directly to women is because ladies, you do have questions about these types of topics. And in many cases, you are the decision maker in the household, but in many cases, you also get overlooked. And when you see how some of these charts look, in terms of how confident women are about retirement versus men, that purple part of the chart, you can see women, about half as many women are very confident about the financial aspects of retirement compared to men. On top of that, unmarried women, and one thing that most unmarried women have in common is that they were married at one point in their life. Only 11% of unmarried women are confident about retirement. And I mentioned it earlier, but I'll say it again. Part of the reason for that, and I'm not going to read this quote to you, but it's a horrible quote. It's terrible, right? Because it's implying that you just didn't do anything, you didn't pay attention. Well, from our standpoint, it's also, did we reach out to you? Did we try to treat you as an equal at the table and make sure that you felt like your voice was being heard? Because it is a two-way street. It isn't just we throw stuff out and you do it. It's, hey, let's have a conversation. Let's figure out what's important to you. And let's show you some of the different ways that you can get there. Now, when you look at this stuff, and you can see some of the realities that you face as a woman, lower lifetime earnings. I'm gonna hit you on lower lifetime earnings from two different perspectives. Some of you may have had to take time off after having children. Maybe you took many years off. Maybe you took a year off. Maybe you took 12 weeks off. But if you were also kind of in that primary caregiver role, you were the person who was trying to get them to and from daycare. You were the person taking them to doctor's appointments. You were doing all these other things. And unless you worked with someone who was really flexible about that, that's going to limit your career advancement, which in turn limits your lifetime earnings. One other end of the spectrum is once your parents need help, in many cases, and it's about 57% of caregivers for their parents are female, and of course the other 43% are male, but the same issues come up now because maybe you're the primary caregiver for a parent who needs help. And again, if you don't have a supportive employer, what opportunities are you missing out on? Are you dealing with absenteeism? Are you dealing with issues with presenteeism? You're at work, but you're exhausted, right? So that translates into lower lifetime earnings. That then means lower pensions. And like Ken talked about in his introduction, a lower pension, a perfect example is your Social Security. Folks, that's a pension. You contributed to it, your employer contributed to it. This third party, the government, is saying, okay, here's what you're going to get once you hit retirement age. And then finally, ladies, despite all that, you do live longer than we do. And I would be willing to bet if we looked at the menu items, right, that many more women chose the fish or the broccoli or the cauliflower or the chicken than men did. And that's just a small sampling, right? That's just a small sample. But when you look at these three things, every now and then someone's like, oh my gosh, Matt's telling me I've got to work another 5 or 10 years. That's not what I'm saying at all. These are realities. If you can work a few more years, well, guess what? You're paying down some debt, maybe. You are adding to your retirement accounts. You're not spending out of the retirement accounts. You're lifting your Social Security and other pensions. And there's actually been actuaries who have studied this. And one of the things that they come out of their studies is if you can do just these 4 things for 1 year, just 1 year, it is like adding 3 years of retirement income to your plan. And again, I'm not saying you need to work a lot longer. I'm not saying you need to work a whole nother year. But what I am saying is that you as a woman have very different realities than most men do. So let's help you make an informed decision. And thank you for making the time to be here tonight. We really appreciate it. Okay, let's jump into Social Security. So the value of Social Security, a couple things I'll talk about. First thing is, I am sure you have all heard someone say Social Security is going to go bankrupt. Well, okay. The follow-up I have for that, and I am a national Social Security advisor. I've been teaching Social Security classes now for about 15 years. And I've yet to meet someone who actually understands what does bankruptcy mean from a Social Security standpoint. What it means is that that trust fund is finally down to zero. Folks, the only reason there was a trust fund in the first place was because for the first 30 to 40 years of Social Security, more people paid into the system than it was paying out in benefits. Well, fast forward, suddenly Americans are living longer, right? Higher income, more income's flowing in. But with those longer lives, that means more years that Social Security has to pay out. Well, okay. As a result, do we see the trust fund declining? And they're saying now within about 10 years, you'll see somewhere between, depending on what you look at, depending on the year, a 20 to 25% reduction in your benefits if the trust fund gets to zero. That's the key. The trust fund gets to zero, the benefits get reduced if Congress allows that to happen, and you still keep getting a benefit though. It doesn't mean that the benefit stops. And so that's one of the things I think the financial press has also done a bad job of. One is engaging with women, but two is fanning the flames of misinformation. The misinformation on Social Security is, could bankruptcy happen? Yes, if Congress chooses not to do anything about it. But even if it does, you're looking at a reduction in benefits, not a discontinuation of benefits. So for tonight's presentation, we're going to assume it's going to be there the whole time. But if you look at this slide that's been up for a little bit now, what you can see is you've got anywhere, and this is just a $2,000 a month benefit, which is about half of what the maximum benefit is today. But if you were getting $2,000 a month and you're getting just a 2% cost of living adjustment, in 30 years, you've received almost $1 million from Social Security. The impact of that 2% cost of living adjustment on the monthly benefit takes it from $2,400 in 10 years all the way up to about $3,600 in 30 years. So Social Security, plan on it being there. We are going to talk about 4 strategies tonight that are going to focus on what you can see on the screen here: marriage, divorce, widowhood, and remarriage. But what I want to stress everybody is that just remember this: you can get one benefit at a time as an individual. If I'm married, I can get my own benefit or a spousal benefit. If I am a widower, I can get my benefit or the survivor benefit I'm eligible for from my spouse. I cannot get both at the same time. So a 2-person household, if you are legally married, not common law, legally married, if you're legally married, there's 2 individuals in the household, each one can get one benefit. When the first person dies, now there's one benefit coming into the household. And we'll talk about how that plays out in a few minutes. Before we get into that, there's really three key questions you want to ask. One is, do you qualify for Social Security on your own work record? 2 is, has your spouse filed? And if so, have they started receiving their benefit? And then number 3, what about prior marriages? But more importantly, with the prior marriages, it's how did they end? Because the rules for a divorce versus the rules for a spouse passing away are very, very different in terms of what's eligible. Again, you're available or you're eligible for one benefit at a time, but the key, folks, is coordinating those benefits, making sure you're coordinating in terms of what you're able to do. Couple key definitions. Okay, so this piece here, what we're going to need to know for your Social Security analysis is, what does Social Security say they'll pay you at your full retirement age? Okay, so when you come to your Social Security analysis meeting, you need to have that number for you and your spouse ready to go. How do you get that number? Log on to the Social Security website, pull your most recent statement. That is by far the fastest and most secure way to get a copy of your benefit statement. But you can see here, if you were born 1960 or later, like most of the people on this call, your full retirement age is age 67. That's the age at which you get 100% of your primary insurance amount. And when you look at your statement, this is what it's going to look like. You're going to see this graph and you're just going to go down. Okay, hey, if I take it at 62 versus 70 or somewhere in the middle, what am I going to get? Okay, full retirement age, if you were born 1960 or later, is age 67. That's the number we need to know to be able to do your Social Security analysis. Okay, let's get into retirement benefits. I already touched on how to get a copy. You can just go to socialsecurity.gov/my account. There's also retirement estimator tools, and there's a load of calculators on their website. It's actually a pretty good website. That retirement benefit, though, Ken talked about this in his introduction. It will depend on when you file. It absolutely will. So if we're looking at this, if I have that $2,000 a month benefit that I mentioned earlier, and I take it at 62, I get a 30% reduction on my benefit. That means I don't get $2,000 a month, I get $1,400 a month. My cost of living adjustments going forward will be based on the $1,400. Those tax advantages Ken talked about, where at least 15% of that is tax-free at the federal level. It's only 15% of the $1,400 at that point. Okay, so what you're doing is you're minimizing not only the benefit, but the future income. You're minimizing the tax advantages of that. And then on top of that, if you're married and your spouse is looking at this as part of what they're going to get once you pass away, you're also minimizing the survivor benefit that your spouse is eligible for as well. So if you apply early, you certainly can. And there are many cases where it makes sense to file early. But what we want to do is we want to look at what is your overall plan. How does this fit into those 5 pillars, right? Remember what I said. This is one part of the income plan. That's it, just one piece of it, okay? You may have another pension. You may have rental properties. You may have other income sources ready to go, but this is part of that. Okay, so keep that in mind. This has nice ripple effects if you do it right. How do you know if you're doing it right? Develop a thorough plan. Okay, what if you wait? What if you want to max out the benefit? Well, in that case, then wait all the way to 70. And that gets you an extra 8% per year. That pushes the benefit up. And all those little ancillary things I talked about. What does your spouse get when you pass away? Maximizing the effect of the cost of living adjustments. Maximizing the tax impact. All that adds in. All that's included here. From a tax planning strategy standpoint, this is where tax planning starts coming in now, is, hey, you know what? If I've got $5 million in my IRA, well, when I'm in my 70s, I've got really big required minimum distributions I have to take. Would it make sense for me to draw some money down in my 60s to help manage that RMD and maximize my Social Security so that now I'm getting the maximum tax advantages from it? In a lot of cases, that does make a lot of sense. So when we're looking at this, every now and then, and there's usually someone who's sitting back thinking, well, the break-even analysis said I was supposed to take it at 64. Okay, whatever. I have never met someone who says that to me, and then my reaction every time is, did you do a tax analysis to see what the long-term impact is? I always ask that question. So if you're thinking that, I'm going to ask you that question right now. Did you do a tax analysis and what's the long-term impact? And when I ask that question, the answer has always been, no, I didn't. So if you're looking at it from a break-even standpoint, for all the reasons we just talked about, don't. Look at it as part of your overall plan. Okay, so what happens later on in life? Well, you can see how the benefits grow, right? So if, let's say I am 62 today and I'm turning 70 later on down the road, if you look at the lower right, let me get the laser pointer here. If you look down at the lower right, what you'll see is that if I'm waiting from 62 to 70, if I add in the cost of living adjustments, And then on top of that, the 8% delayed credits. Well, now my $2,000 a month benefit has turned into almost a $3,000 a month benefit. So cost of living adjustments plus those 8% credits can have a meaningful impact on what this number is. And then, of course, that follows you later in life as well. If you've got longevity in your family, and folks, my wife and I have a ton of longevity in our family. We have, sorry, my mouse is kind of going all over the place. We have, on my wife's side of the family, both of her grandmothers are in their mid-90s. They're both living at home. One of them has some extended care issues, like she needs help getting out of bed and stuff like that, but mentally very sharp, listens to her audiobooks all the time, has some vision issues, right? But super sharp lady in her mid-90s living at home. Her other grandmother is still driving in her mid-90s. Again, very sharp, living at home, taking care of herself. So my wife has a ton of longevity. Well, in my family, my mom's dad lived to be almost 97. He ran the family farm back in Minnesota, which is where I grew up. Folks, he did the physical work on the farm till he was 92. And then he got to the point he couldn't climb up the back of a tractor anymore. So he decided to just kind of be the CEO of the farm, which he ran right up until the day he died. And then, of course, my dad didn't retire till he was 78. And he's 87. Him and my mom are flying to San Antonio from Minnesota, which is where they still live, this Thanksgiving to come down to see our daughters perform in the Nutcracker Ballet. And then right after that, right after Thanksgiving, my mom and him are, and my mom's 82, my mom and him are taking off to go to France. They're going to have Christmas at Versailles. What am I thinking when I'm looking at this stuff? Well, first of all, anything can happen. Could I have some kind of major illness? Could I get in a bad accident, right? Of course, those things can happen. We all know those things can happen. We all know people, we've all lived it in our lives. People we deeply care about, suddenly they're dealing with this incredible issue that came up. But you know what the prudent person does? If you're looking at longevity at all, the prudent person plans to live a long life. And the reason you do that is because the worst case scenario is if you did die early and unexpectedly, you died with a couple extra bucks in your pocket. That's not such a bad worst case scenario. So when Ken talks about, we want to work with people, we really want to work with people who want to work with us to help build that long-term plan. Because ultimately that's going to benefit not just you, but your spouse and your family if it's a really well integrated plan. Okay, when to apply for Social Security? We've touched on all this. If you start low, your benefit stays low, you minimize the taxes, the cost of living adjustment, you also minimize, or I should say, the tax benefits are minimized. Sorry, you minimize the tax benefits, the cost of living adjustments, and then on top of that, you are also minimizing survivor benefits for your spouse. One other reason not to file before full retirement age, at least, and that is withholding. So Social Security, if you have earned income between 62 and your full retirement age, Social Security will withhold $1 in benefits for every $2 that you earn over $23,400. Run the string out on that. If you're making more than $70,000 or $80,000 a year, there is no reason for you to file before your full retirement age because they will just withhold the entire benefit. It won't matter. So don't do it, right? If you like what you do, if you love what you do and you want to keep working, if you're in a situation where you feel like you need to keep working because you got to play catch up, at least wait till full retirement age to get your Social Security. Once you get to full retirement age, you can double dip. You can get the full Social Security check. You can get your full earned income. And by the way, that's what my dad did. He did that at 65 because his full retirement age was 65 because he was born in 1938. But he took his at 65. And like I said before, he didn't retire until he was 78. He had 13 years where he had earned income and a full Social Security check. And oh, by the way, he got cost of living adjustments along the way. And they had to recalculate his benefit every year. Because the way they calculate your Social Security benefit is they look at your best 35 years of income. Not your first 35, not your last 35, not the best 35 in a row. They look at your best 35. They go in and look for them. Okay. Then they apply a formula to it, and that's how they develop what your benefit amount is. So, from a planning standpoint, one of the things that we are super focused on is if someone loves what they do, it might make sense to file at full retirement age, do something with that money, because their benefit's going to get recalculated every year. For my dad, it essentially turned into, it was like he waited till 70 to get his maximum benefit. So it can work out really well, but just be aware of this. Be aware of this. Okay, let's talk about spousal benefits. This is really, really easy to understand. The key is there's a wrinkle in this that a lot of people just aren't aware about. So if you're married and your spouse has a bigger Social Security check than you, they wait till their full retirement age. That's part of the wrinkle. They wait till their full retirement age and then they file. And then you turn around and wait till your full retirement age and file as their spouse. And now you'll get a benefit that is equal to half of theirs. Okay, so in this case, you see we've got a $2,400 benefit. That person waits until full retirement age, they file. The second benefit, the $1,200 a month benefit, that's kicked in when the second person files at their full retirement age. Household income is now $3,600 a month. If you file before full retirement age, they don't play shell games with you. They will give you the bigger of the two benefits. So if you have your own benefit that's maybe bigger than the spousal benefit, that's what you'll get. If it's smaller than the spousal benefit, then they'll make sure you get the spousal benefit. Now, this is something that I get asked about this at least 5 or 6 times a year by people, and this is coordinating benefits. So usually the scenario is someone comes to me and says, hey, you know what? I'm going to file at 62 so I can get some money now. And then my spouse is going to file at full retirement age. And then when I file at full retirement age, I'm going to switch over and get that spousal benefit that you just talked about, right? Partially right. You won't get the full 50%. And in this example, what you can see here is we have that $2,400 a month benefit. The spouse has an income benefit of $800 a month. So if they both wait until full retirement age, household income is $3,200 from Social Security. Well, if this person files at 62, they get that reduction that we've talked about. So now they're getting $560 a month. They're not getting the $800. And then if this person then says, oh, okay, well, my spouse filed, now I'm going to go become that spouse or switch over to that spouse benefit, they won't go up to $1,200. They're going to get an extra $260, which means their benefit grows to a maximum, in this case, of $820 a month. They won't get the full $1,200. Why? Because you filed at 62. That's why. That decision to file at 62 will follow you throughout the system. Okay, so just remember that. There's not really a way to game the system on this. Years ago, there was a strategy called file and suspend, where you could kind of work the system a little bit, and that hasn't been around since 2016, almost 10 years now. All right. I mentioned this already, so I'm gonna move past this. Here we go. Okay. All right, let's talk divorces. And I shouldn't smile when I say talk divorces. We have actually worked with people over the years where we end up becoming essentially a marriage counselor. And believe it or not, Social Security has caused at least 2 marriages for our clients, maybe more. It has also it's also taken a divorce that was stretching on to 9.5 years and extended that divorce to just over 10 years. So from a divorce planning standpoint, you got to make sure you understand the rules. And those rules really come down to what you see on the screen here. But I do have a funny story for you about this. So years ago, a financial advisor who's a good friend of mine who works out of Omaha, Nebraska, asked me if I'd be willing to come into town and do a Social Security workshop for him. So I did. I came in, I gave this version of the presentation from, I don't know, 12 or 13 years ago. And at the end of the presentation, this wonderful lady, very nice lady, walked up to me afterwards and said, hey, you know what? I have a question for you. I've got this friend who has 3 ex-husbands. What should she do? And so, folks, I kind of went down the checklist that you can see in front of you. So, first question I asked her was, hey, did each marriage last at least 10 years? She said, well, yeah, they did. I said, okay. Is she currently unmarried? She is. Are those exes all at least 62 or older? They are. Were the divorces all at least 2 years ago? They were. I'm like, wow, she's lived a really interesting life. And I said, you know, what your friend can do is essentially go down to the Social Security office or call them, make sure you've got enough information to identify your ex, right? Like you might want to bring the divorce decree with you, might want to have it handy, right? But she just needs to ask him two questions. One is, what am I eligible for while my ex is alive? And then what am I eligible for once my ex passes away? Those are the only two questions, and they'll tell her. And then based on which ex gives the most money, that's the person under whom she should file as the ex-spouse. So this lady smiles. She thinks about it for a second. She looks at me and she says, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So funny but true story, but those are the key points with this. 10 years of marriage. Okay, we actually have some California, at least one couple in California. They were creeping up on 9.5 years, and we talked with them, and they were willing to stretch it out for 10 years to finally get the divorce decree finalized. Currently unmarried. Hey, folks, if you get remarried before the age of 60, you are tied to your new spouse for benefits while you're both alive and once your spouse passes away. That ex has to be at least 62, and if the divorce was more than 2 years ago, that ex does not have to have filed at all. You can go get a divorce spouse benefit right away. A couple other key points here. I won't run you through the example, but a couple other key points here. When you do that, that ex will not know. Their benefit is not affected. That ex could have moved on and got remarried. It will not affect their current spouse. That ex could have other ex-spouses who they were married to for at least 10 years. It won't affect them either. They won't know. The only way your ex is going to know is if they hear it through your grapevine. You told your kids, your kids tell them, right? That's the only way they're going to know. So from a planning standpoint, this is also important because this is protecting people. This is making sure that, hey, you know what? Someone who was maybe in a really bad relationship for a long time, that person's not going to come screaming back into your life because you filed for a benefit and suddenly maybe it reduced theirs or had some impact on them. They'll never know. They'll never know. Okay, let's move on to survivor benefits. What happens when somebody passes away? Well, when somebody passes away, the benefit is really tied to two things. When did the person who died file? And then when does the survivor take the survivor benefit? Those are the two ages that will define what that survivor benefit really will be. So here's an example. We've got this $2,400 a month benefit. Maybe the person waited all the way to 70. They never even got their first check. They waited till 70. They filed. They were expecting to get that $3,000 a month, and they passed away unexpectedly. Well, guess what? Because they waited till 70, their spouse, if they wait till their full retirement age, they get the full $2,976 a month. They get this full number. However, if that person had filed early at say 62, the most that person would ever get is about $2,000 a month. And folks, where it gets really sobering is, you know, we always talk about, hey, if you wait, you get more, right? Well, a couple key ages you got to keep in mind when it comes to survivor benefits. First thing is, if your spouse passes away, you can take a survivor benefit as early as age 60. As early as 60. Now, remember, I mentioned earlier withholding for Social Security. If you're working, that withholding applies to the survivor benefit as well. So it might not make sense to take that survivor benefit right away. It might not, okay? But you can take a benefit as early as 60. If your spouse filed at 62, look what happens at your age 63. The most you're ever going to get is 82.5%. It's capped from that point on. If your spouse waited, and let's say in this case they waited all the way to 70, well, guess what? You are going to get more money right out of the gate if you have to take it early. But again, if you can wait till 67, If you can wait till your full retirement age, you're going to get 100% of whatever they were getting once they passed away. So from a planning standpoint, we think this is super important, and we think it's super important for a couple of reasons. One is, and you can see some of the rules here, you do have to have been married at least 9 months unless the death was the result of an accident. But you have the ability to do what you can see on the left here. You can get the higher of your survivor benefit or your retirement benefit, but not both. Okay. So I mentioned that a couple times already. You as an individual can get one benefit. Okay. So here's a married couple. They got the bigger benefits here, the smaller benefits here. Total income while they're both alive from Social Security is about $4,200 a month. When that first spouse dies, it doesn't matter who dies first. When the first spouse dies, the smaller benefit will stop. Household income from Social Security will now drop to $2,976. Once enough time has passed, that surviving spouse now has to start filing as a single person. In addition to that, your Medicare premiums, if you have really good income, your Medicare premiums are probably going to skyrocket 2 years later because the means testing for your Part B and your Part D on Medicare, which is called IRMA, that's going to kick in as well because the brackets for that are much more challenging for a single person than they are for a married couple. So again, while this is seeing just a reduction in benefits, we're also seeing issues in terms of taxation, in terms of just straight up income taxes, but also in Medicare surcharges as well. So again, you need to plan for this, right? You can't just say, oh yeah, okay, well, I get it. It's 25,000 less a year in this case, right around that. No, tax bill goes up. Medicare premiums go up. Income goes down. That's what happens to that surviving spouse. Okay, divorced spouse, if you were divorced and then you passed, you followed all the rules, right? Married at least 10 years. Now, here's the key. You're unmarried or you waited at least till age 60 to get remarried. Okay, you got remarried after the age of 60. In that case, you can still cherry pick the biggest survivor benefit once your ex passes away. So for years, and she's getting married this weekend, so she's blowing it for us. But for 15 years, I've been able to talk about my friend Kelly from Minnesota. And she knows I tell this story. But she was married to a high income earner for about 12 years. They got divorced. They had 2 kids together, got divorced. She never remarried. And she always said one of the reasons she wasn't going to remarry is because of this. She wanted to make sure she had her ex's survivor benefit. Well, Kelly is now almost 59 and she's getting married this weekend. So from a planning perspective, folks, Kelly always said, I'm going to wait till 60 to get remarried to do this. Well, she threw it out the window. But that's the key. Okay. If you're concerned about retaining that bigger survivor benefit, you got to go to age 60. You got to go to age 60 before you get remarried. Okay, time check here. We are at 20 after. I am going to go the full 10 minutes before we wrap up, but I promise you we will wrap up by the bottom of the hour, and then we will keep the room open for some questions once we're done. So if you think you're going to outlive your spouse or one of you has longevity in your family, whoever has the bigger benefit, that's generally the person who needs to wait to take their Social Security benefit. Okay. Here is something I mentioned before about the flexibility that comes into play when you have a survivor benefit available to you. So the essential thing here, and let me back up a slide. The essential thing here is you have the ability when you have a survivor benefit to take the bigger benefit last. Now remember, you can only get one benefit at a time, but you can take a smaller benefit, let the bigger benefit get as big as it possibly can, and then take that. So here's 2 examples. I do think these are worth going through. So here we have Linda. She has a benefit that's equal to $1,000. The survivor benefit she's eligible for is $2,200. What could Linda do? She could take her benefit at 62. She's only going to get $700 a month, but then at full retirement age, switch over to the survivor benefit, and now she's getting $2,200 a month. So she's getting $8,400 a year for essentially 5 years.
to wait and let that other benefit get as big as possible. Flip it around. Dora's the higher income earner in this scenario. Survivor benefit's $1,800. Hey, guess what? You could take the survivor benefit at 60.
Don't forget about the withholding,
By the way, do not forget about that. But you could take that benefit as early as 60 and then switch to your own retirement benefit at 70, which means you've now maxed that out. So you can do that when your spouse has passed away. So remarriage, a couple key points. Remarriage at any age cancels out the divorced spouse benefit unless that marriage ends. You have to be unmarried to get the divorced spouse benefit. Remarriage before age 60 cancels out any previous survivor benefits. Your survivor benefit is now based on what you have with your current spouse. Remarriage after 60 does not affect those survivor benefits for the retired spouse. All right, summary of the survivor planning here for you. Bottom line is this. If your spouse is the higher income earner, that's the person who should wait. You may be retired. You may be still working, right? It might not make sense to file early. However, I will say this, and I know we've talked a lot about filing late. If you have health issues, if you need the money, if you don't need the money and feel like you can invest it and get a better return by just investing that over time, or you want to use it as a gifting resource of some kind, there's a host of reasons why you might want to take it early. And everybody's different, right? But if you're thinking about it more in terms of an income plan, then you want to make sure you've got the maximum income, the maximum COLAs, and the maximum tax efficiencies as well. So again, for the survivor benefit, compare your benefit to the survivor benefit, take the bigger benefit last. And for those of you who have gone through a divorce, don't get remarried before 60 if you're trying to preserve that benefit. So, advice for you based on marital status. If you're currently married, talk to each other. Coordinate, coordinate, coordinate. I cannot stress how important it is to coordinate benefits and resources. If you're divorced, make sure you understand what those divorced spouse benefits are. I'll say this as well. If you get an answer when maybe you call Social Security and you ask them, or you go down to the office and you ask them, if you get an answer that doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. My mother-in-law went through, is exactly this person, this divorced person. So she got divorced about 25 years ago. And about 10 years ago, well, not 10 years ago, about 7 or 8 years ago, she filed for her Social Security. And she asked me what to do. And I said, oh, that's easy. Just go down to your local office, tell them, hey, I'm divorced. Here's my ex. Ask the 2 questions, right? What am I eligible for while he's alive? What am I eligible for once he dies? So she does that. And they tell her, you're not eligible for anything. I'm like, okay. So then I say, well, call the Social Security Administration because that's not the right answer. They tell her the same thing. And I'm like, okay. So then she comes down to San Antonio to see the grandkids, me, her, and our oldest, whose name is Chloe, who was 3.5 or 4 years old at the time. I don't know what got into me to think it was a good idea to take a young child like that to the Social Security office. But we went down there. We stood in line. Chloe did great, by the way. We stood in line. We waited. We got across the thick bulletproof glass from the young lady. And I said, okay, go ahead. She asked the question and she types on her screen, or whatever. And then she says, yeah, you're not eligible for anything. Now I could feel my mother-in-law do this. Just look at me. And I could tell what was going through her mind was, my daughter married a moron. I could just tell. This is the 3rd time she'd heard this answer. And I just said, okay, I'm sorry, but unless the rules have changed, I don't believe it works that way. Could we maybe talk to a supervisor about this? Supervisor comes out a few minutes later with 2 spreadsheets. He had highlighted in yellow. He said, ma'am, I am so sorry for the confusion. Yes, while you're alive, here's the spousal benefit you're eligible for. Once your husband passes away, here's the survivor benefit you're eligible for. Again, we're sorry for the confusion. So if you get an answer that does not make sense, it doesn't make sense, ask to talk to a supervisor. We all saw the staffing issues and they're cutting staff and all that. you might have to jump in it for the long haul. I would say as well, we are a great resource for this. We have tools at our disposal that we can get you information that's accurate and timely as well. So use us as a resource as well. If you're a surviving spouse, don't forget what I said. Coordinate your benefit, right? It might make sense to take your smaller benefit first and then your bigger benefit later. If you've never been married, I get this feedback every now and then from someone who says, well, Matt, the presentation was so focused on couples. I don't believe any of this really applies to me. I actually completely disagree with that assessment. And the reason I disagree with it is because it absolutely still applies to you. It's just maybe a little bit of a simpler equation because we don't have this other person as a variable in the equation. How long are they going to live? What's their benefit? When are they going to file? What's a survivor benefit? You're not worried about those things because there isn't that other person in the mix. You still need to make a good decision to make sure that you're maximizing cost of living adjustments, you're maximizing the tax planning, and you're making sure you're making a good decision in the overall context of your plan. And again, I mentioned this earlier, but if you are a surviving spouse, make sure you understand how those benefits work. And again, use us as a resource if you need to. We got about 3 minutes to go. I do want to focus on 1 or 2 points here. And I've cut on most, I've covered all this really, but folks, the key really is, and after a very long time of doing this, the key to this is making an informed financial decision. How does this decision affect the rest of my plan? And we do run into people every year who say, yeah, I'm just going to do this. That's fine. But please make sure that you're thinking about it in the context of the bigger plan. I mentioned we have people who come into it thinking break-even analysis. And usually once we start really digging in for them, they're surprised by what they see. We have some people come in and say, oh, well, from a time value of money standpoint, and once we layer in the tax efficiency and the cost of living adjustment, there is no time value of money argument at that point. But regardless of whether you feel like you need this benefit or it's just a portion of an income plan for you, which we really hope is just a portion of the income plan, you still want to make a good decision when it comes to that benefit. So again, an informed decision helps you be confident, helps you make the great decision. We are going to do a Social Security analysis for everybody on the call. At the end of that meeting, you will get your Social Security analysis in a PDF format. You can take it with you. We are going to send out a questionnaire in advance of your meeting. You should see that either later tonight or tomorrow morning. Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, that comes out under your email, correct? Or does that come out under Mission Financial Planners?
Yes, if I'm sending it, it'll say Kenneth Hamilton sending you your Social Security analysis questionnaire.
Okay, so that's going to come from Ken. Okay, that's legit. In there, you'll see you can just put in your current age and your full retirement age benefit. You don't have to answer anything else if you're not comfortable with that at this point. That's okay. That follow-up meeting is about 45 minutes. We'll get to know each other a little better on a one-on-one basis. You will see how everything we talked about tonight works out based on your real numbers, not on some $2,000 a month benefit that we used as an example in the workshop. One last shameless plug that I will give, and I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning here. If you want to get a good idea of how we really view coordinated planning, 99 cents tomorrow on Kindle. Get it, read it. You will rip through it. We're not trying to overwhelm you with stats and data and everything else. It is meant to say, hey, conceptually, here is what we're trying to achieve in these different areas, and here's how they fit together. I think you'll be impressed. I think it'll be something you'll want to share with your friends as well. But read it, and if you have a chance to read it before your Social Security analysis, great, fantastic. Come armed with questions. We would love to have an in-depth conversation like that. That's what we kind of live for. So, okay, I'm at 31 after. Ken, I'm sure we had a ton of questions. Let me go back to our contact page here.
were there any common themes, I should say, in the questions for tonight?
Yeah, a lot of them are things that are directly why we do the Social Security analysis.
Okay.
Should I take it at 62 and claim my spouse is at 67 or 70? What are the implications if they passed away at 55 or 57? Those kinds of areas. And so I'll say this. Everything we talked about was through the lens of Social Security and getting the most from Social Security. But sometimes, like your friend whose birthday is today, the most from Social Security isn't necessarily the most in your pocket because there are other things that you need to be thinking about and considering. There's a lot of times it makes sense to claim it at 62 because it reduces the pressure off of your investments and let those things grow and hum. Again, your plan is your plan, and that's what we believe in. And so the Social Security analysis, you will have your numbers and understand how to optimize that, but that is just one piece of the puzzle. And that's why it's puzzle pieces on the 5 pillars, because they all fit together. We thought
Yeah.
about it. But there was one question that he didn't have a chance to type the answer to is
Okay.
what happens if you did not get all 35 years into Social Security? Well, frankly, there's a few zeros. So let's say you worked 31 of 35. There are 4 zeros on your record. But if you remember from grade school, if there were 35 homework assignments and you turned in 31 and the 31 were all A's, you're still probably walking out with an A. Those 4 zeros aren't going to impact it that much. The other question to a follow up to that is, well, what if I was a business owner? Well, that throws a whole other wrench into things because maybe you're familiar with business owners and how they can adjust their wages and live through draws or other forms of dollars through the business. It's really going to depend on what you paid for yourself. But because you are a small business owner and you've paid both sides of the FICA tax, the full 15%, it's that much more important that you're making a wise choice with it because you've paid twice as much as all of your peers.
Yeah, and Ken, if I can elaborate on that business owner conversation for just a moment. When if you're still working and maybe this decision is a few years away, one of the things we've done with business owners in the past is we look at how that benefit formula really works. Because there's the technical term that they use is bend points. There's 3 bend points in the formula. The lower income, which is bend point 1, is weighed more heavily than the higher income, which is bend point 3. So for some business owners who are looking to, cut their FICA bill a little bit every year, sometimes it makes sense to salary yourself right up to bend point 2 on average, but do not W-2 yourself for the rest of it, right? That doesn't work for everybody, right? But the reason I'm sharing that is that's where something like Social Security planning does factor into running a business, because that will, in some cases, have a direct impact on your bottom line at the business on a year-to-year basis. So when we're looking at this, hopefully what you're taking out of this tonight is this isn't just a slam dunk, yes, no, I'm taking it at this age. It is, hey, you know what? I've got to think about me, my ex, my spouse who passed away. I've got to think about, oh my gosh, I'm the one with the longevity, but maybe I'm the one with the big benefit, or maybe I'm not the one with the big benefit, right? There's all those things to think about, and then layer in the tax planning, and then layer in how it affects your business, right? Now, all of a sudden, it's not as simple as we thought. We all love simple. Everybody loves simple. And unfortunately, as we all know, we live in a world of gray. And so, and I don't mean that in a negative way, folks. I don't mean that at all. It's just everyone's trying to feel their way through and make a good decision and hope they're making the right decision for themselves. Again, this is step 1 of getting educated so you can make an informed financial decision. And that's in our mission statement, is we want to help you make that informed financial decision. Ken, any other big questions that came up tonight?
That was a common theme is, here's my circumstances. What should I be thinking about? Earnings test, who made more, what income sources are coming in today, longevity. Guys, that's what we'll talk about. And I look forward to meeting each of y'all in the next couple weeks.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone. Hopefully everybody got a great meal. It didn't seem like there were many issues with the meals tonight, or really any issues with the meals. So thanks again, and we will see you all soon. Have a great night.
Take care. Bye, Pam.